All right, it's not the first day of the year, I guess, but the first video recorded in the year. It's January 2nd. I already had to check the date. How bad is that? I'm headed to CrossFit, so these videos, I'm usually not totally awake yet, but that's how it goes in the morning. The problem is that I can't, it's kind of a funny problem. I can't caffeinate before CrossFit because my heart rate still is like one of my huge limiting factors in CrossFit. So if I caffeinate, like just to wake up, then my heart rate will be way too high as soon as I start working out. So it really sucks because I have to basically not be awake and then go do CrossFit, which means my workout usually sucks. So anyway, that's going to take a long time before that's all kind of balanced out, but on the way. But I have a topic for today. It's from Reddit. I jumped to, I think, the subreddit's CS career questions and not experienced devs. I was going to switch things up a little bit. And the question was around projects that employers care about. And I've talked about this before, but I wanted to, there's going to be repeat topics that come up on Commute. Sort of the reality of the situation here. So let me just get the heat on. So I'm going to talk through that from my perspective as a hiring manager for over 12 years. And I want to preface everything with this is my opinion from what I've seen, how I approach things. And if people were coming and asking me directly what I would recommend, that does not mean it's the only way. That does not mean that other people will do this different ways. Nice green lights. So keep that in mind. You have to kind of, anything I say online or what other people say online, please take it as a data point, a perspective, and then, interpret these things and take your own actions. With that said, though, if you want questions answered, please leave them in the comments. Or look for Dev Leader on any social media platform. Send me a message. If you want to write more, keep it anonymous, what have you. And a friendly reminder that Mondays at 7 p.m. Pacific on my main channel, Dev Leader, I do a live stream on topics like this, but there's chat because it's live, so you can interact with me, ask your questions live. And yeah, I'd love to see you there. So when it comes to projects, I think one of the reasons this is a tricky thing to answer, while you'll see so many varieties in answers, is because it's almost like there's a lot of right answers and not necessarily every answer is wrong just because it's different, which sounds funny. But one of the things that's really important for projects, just to kind of start things off here, is impact. Because employers, and when people are looking through resumes and stuff, and you probably have seen this if you've already been in the industry, impact is really important. You want to be able to demonstrate impact. So when we're talking about projects on a resume, what I would say is if you've already been working, okay? You've already been working, you have some years of experience, I would say the projects that you want to list on your resume from your work experience, it would be really good to show things with impact. And how you talk about them, demonstrating impact, is really important. Okay? I also want to mention as I go through this, my goal is to try and talk about this from a few different angles. One is going to be during the interview, and the other is going to be sort of from a recruiter perspective. So impact is going to be especially important during the interview process because people will be able to kind of ask behavioral interview questions about that impact. Now, hopefully recruiters are also able to kind of scan for that kind of thing and say, oh, okay, this person worked on things that did have a high impact. The difference here is that when people are talking about or asking questions about what projects to list, I think a lot of the time and obviously there's going to be a variety here, but I think a lot of the time it's actually very beginner people that are saying, hey, I was told to go build projects so that I could apply for jobs. What should I list here? And I think personally, this is where I think there's like some confusion and probably the most room for like arguing different perspectives. But if you haven't ever worked before, okay, like yes, it would be great to be able to show impact, but if you're just starting out, it would be like my opinion is it's kind of ridiculous for me to expect that you have experiences that you can list down that demonstrate a lot of impact. And this is where people will say, oh, like what employers want to see is that you've started a business, that you have paying users, that you're solving real world problems. And like, this is what I've talked about before. And like, my opinion is like, sure, that's nice, but also like, I'm literally not hiring you for the side business that you've started. So yeah, I think it's cool. I think it's helpful. I don't think that it's a negative by any means. Like that's actually great. But I think that when I'm looking for hiring more junior people, I just want to see that you've tried building real things, because the reality is if you are someone who has been building software, regardless of whether or not it has real paying users or, you know, you're solving, you know, like these worldly problems, the fact is that you're putting software together and building things, you're already a step ahead of everyone else who literally has not demonstrated that, right? And this is a tricky thing, I think, for some people to realize, because I get that you want to put your best foot forward, but there's actually a lot of people that aren't even doing that. So having some type of project listed is already helping. My personal opinion is that when you're a beginner and you're listing projects, sure, if you have something where you've been able to get real users and stuff like that, that's super cool. But that's actually a whole lot of work that's not just software engineering. And I can say this with a high degree of confidence. Like, I'm building something on the side called Brand Ghost. To be able to to be able to do sales and marketing for that and acquire users is not trivial, and it also has literally zero to do with software engineering. Okay? So those are whole different skill sets. So it's not like it's bad if you have those, but the amount of time and effort that has to go into that is completely disproportional to the other skills that you probably want to be trying to build up as a software engineer in the beginning. Again, I'll say it, it's not bad if you have them, it's great, but there's like a disproportionate return on investment than if you were just like learning how to build something in a framework, or practicing refactoring code, or, you know, working with a database that you've never worked with before. So again, my opinion when it comes to juniors and like newbies putting stuff like projects on resumes is highlight technologies and stuff you're learning, demonstrate that you're building things. I think that goes a super long way. And that's my kind of take on that part. I did a quick scan on this thread, and to kind of go back to my earlier point about during the interview versus what recruiters and stuff are looking at. This is kind of like a bit of like an unfortunate reality, but I think it needs to be talked about. And I've talked about this in general for years now, but when we think about job applications, when we think about interviewing, and when we think about actual experience on the job, unfortunately, these aren't the same thing. And I think in a perfect world, we'd be able to, you know, just simply write down what we did at work, and that would work effectively on a resume, and it would work effectively for recruiters. And then during an interview, we could simply just describe the things we did, and that would work perfectly in all interviews. And then obviously when you're starting the job, it's all just things that you've simply discussed. But it's not like that. It's very much like different things that you're trying to target. So in the first phase, when you're just trying to make sure that your application can get seen, can get picked up by recruiters, like there's a visibility element that's really important, and it's kind of two fronts in my opinion. This is honestly where I have the least experience on like from a big tech perspective, because I've never seen the systems that get used in big tech. Okay, I must imagine, based on the volume of applications, there is a bunch of automation in place. Just purely based on volume of applications, I think it's impossible for a human being to go through all of them effectively. So that's the first thing I wanted to mention. So if there's going to be some type of automation, and I would just encourage people to assume that people will be turning more and more to automation to go through job applications, because it's unrealistic for one human to go through thousands of job applications in a timely manner. If that's going to be the case, what types of things will automation look for? So I do think that keywords are an element to this. So being able to mention technologies you use. I think that if you want to make an argument that like, oh, that's not necessary, I would say in an ideal world, I don't think you need to list every technology or language, because I've even said this as a hiring manager. When I'm interviewing someone, I don't even care if you like know C# and that's the language we use. You will be taught C#. The problem is that like, if I give you that advice, like, hey, it doesn't matter if you know C#, and then you go, cool, I won't even mention it on my resume. Like, that's kind of dangerous advice, because if there's any automation that is looking for keywords like that, it's just not going to help you. In fact, it might harm you because other people have mentioned it, and now you have X number of candidates that are scoring higher in automation than you are. So I would recommend put some keywords down, especially when you're talking about your projects, what technology is being used. And I think that helps during that first phase of being screened. Okay, so that's important. My experience at startups with this kind of stuff is that I can remember talking with HR or even some of the other software engineers, because we would do a bit of distributed like resume review. It's one of those things where we'd say it's great if they have it, like then we understand where they're at, but like that's not something. If someone had a lot of really good experience and not in the language we use, we're not going to say, oh, well, no. And that changed over time, right? Because when we were a startup in the very, very beginning, because I started at Magnet Forensics when it was like 7 or 8 people, it's really difficult to bring on someone that doesn't know the language that you're using when you're 7 or 8 people, including like sales and marketing and stuff, right? You don't really have capacity to teach people that stuff, as much as we'd like to say that we do. But that changed over time when there was enough capacity to have engineers onboard people. So during an interview, for me at least, I was kind of hinting at this already, right? But I'm less interested in knowing like, oh, you worked on this project. Oh, you didn't use C#. Oh, okay, like, maybe not. Or, oh, you haven't used ASP.NET Core. Oh, big red flag. It's not, to me, it's not like that. When I'm interviewing and going through projects, I want to just talk through your approach to building those things. I gotta move over lanes and people aren't making the space. We will do it a different way. And one more. Okay. And so that's already like a difference between like job applications and interviews, right? Like, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, hey, if you want to keyword stuff a little bit because it's going to help with automation, I don't think that's a terrible idea, as long as those are real things that you have experience with, right? If you don't actually have experience with them, that's just lying. So don't do that, because that will come back to haunt you. I will say, though, that during the interview itself, if I'm asking about technologies and languages and stuff, it's not to test, for you to prove to me that you've used C# or ASP.NET Core or something like that. I would be asking because I'm just curious, like, oh, well, why is it that you chose C#, or why did you use ASP.NET Core, or why did you pick that database technology? It's just about understanding your thought process, right? Why did you go refactor this? Why did you have to go rewrite this? Why, like, you know, just walk me through your thought process, because what you're going to be doing when you're hired on is building software. I want to understand how you think through things, how you approach solving problems, and walking through projects, I feel like, is an awesome way to do that. Okay, so quick recap so far. I think that impact is really important to have somewhere on your resume. So if you are experienced already, taking projects from work is a great way to do that. If you have no work experience, again, if you're able to show that you've built something with users and stuff, that's super cool. I would say that does help demonstrate like some type of impact or use case. That's super cool. It's just not my expectation for really junior people. And the other thing that I wanted to call out with that is that it's not what I'm hiring for, right? Like, for you to be able to say, I have this many users and make this much money from my application, I think that's so cool for you, but I'm also not hiring you to get your application, right? So the skills that you have from doing that might be great, and they might have some carryover. I've talked about this before too. From a startup perspective, it might be really helpful to show that people really get like this view of like kind of thinking about business as well as building like actual code. So like that can be helpful, and I would say more helpful in maybe like a startup context. But like if I were hiring people for my team right now at Microsoft, like it's not going to be a value add for folks that I'm looking for. Again, doesn't mean right or wrong. I'm just saying that's the reality of it for me. If you don't have something that shows impact like that, and you're junior, I think that's totally fine. I would focus on things that demonstrate your learning, right? So talk about projects, talk about what you were learning, talk about, if you were refactoring, rewriting, like why those things were happening. Like, I think that's super cool. If you are experienced, right, you've been in the industry for a while and you're looking at your resume and you're like, hey, these projects don't really talk about the impact, I would say that's a really good opportunity to go back and revisit your resume, especially if you've been having challenges with job applications and stuff like that. It might be a really good opportunity to say, like, it's not that the projects were bad or something like that, but it might be how you're messaging those things. Okay, so take that opportunity to talk about what you did and how you delivered impact, and how, especially if it's quantifiable, super helpful, right? That really helps people see a lot of the time, I think as software engineers, what happens is that we go to talk about accomplishments, and what we like to do is just talk about all the super technical details. But imagine someone who's reading your resume who has literally no idea what you're doing, and then you just dive deep on all the super technical details. Like, that's going to be hard for them to interpret. So being able to speak to these things at a different level, like the impact, is very helpful. But then also the other thing I mentioned is that including some types of keywords is a helpful strategy, and I think that's purely because automation. But that's my take on that. So I'm just getting to CrossFit right now. I hope you found that helpful. Again, I'll say it out loud. That's my perspective on this stuff as someone who's been hiring and as a manager for 12 years. Other people might have different takes on that. So I wish you success in your job applications, and new year, I hope that things start looking up for people. So if you have any questions on any of that, please just leave a comment. You can message me, like I said. And happy New Year, and I'll see you next time. Take care.